Well, hello, and a very warm welcome back to the Andrew Eborn Show with me, Andrew Eborn, my very special guest, good friend, Greg Swenson. How are you, Greg?
Great to see you, Andrew. It's only been a day.
I know we had such
Yeah.
fun down in Windsor. So, Greg is the chair of
Yeah.
Republicans Overseas UK. We were both covering for different platforms, more platforms than Paddington, Trump's amazing, unprecedented second state visit. What have been the highlights for you?
Well, there's a handful. I think the day in Windsor was fantastic yesterday, just making the rounds. And I was really pleased with the people in Windsor. I didn't see any, I mean, I saw a handful of loonies, protesters or whatever, but very few. And what I did see was a lot of people coming up to me and you and Jennifer Ewing and saying, keep up the great work, or I have seen you on, whatever platform. And there was so much Trump love in Windsor yesterday. I was really shocked. I
Yeah.
was I was really shocked.
Absolutely. And in spite of the media reports, it was just a handful of people, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, it was really I think the just like the protests in Westminster, which I walked through last night. There was 5,000 people. I mean, that was like that was a rounding error compared to last Saturday. In the United Kingdom march and then or whatever it was called, the rally, and and I even found on Tuesday when you and I saw each other in Windsor. There was just a buzz there, and the only crazies I saw were the handful that broke into our dinner on Tuesday night. So
Well, I was going to ask you about that because you and I, we had a lovely reception at the Guildhall
yeah,
in Windsor. Fantastic. And somebody from Just Stop Oil managed to infiltrate that. Tell us
that's
about
right.
that.
Well, and it's funny, Andrew, you could have taken their seats because they left abruptly right at the beginning. So we had four empty chairs for the evening. I should have and so I'll try to be brief. We had the nice reception which you attended outside from 7 to 8. We went in for dinner at 8, and before everybody, just as everyone was seated for the first course, before I could even stand up and welcome everybody, this woman, a very well-dressed woman, so she kind of blended in. She didn't look unusual. She stood up and said, "I'd like to make a toast to President Trump." And she starts saying some nice things for about 15 seconds. And then she breaks into complete Trump derangement syndrome. And it turns out she had infiltrated the dinner from Just Stop Oil or some other organization like that. And then this man next to her stands up and opens up his jacket, and he's got a banner on his shirt or a t-shirt that says something about, Trump or oil is bad or whatever. And and so we ran up there, and I sort of, cut off the woman as fast as I could, and people were clinking their glasses so she couldn't be hurt anymore. And then Andre Walker and his mate, who was doing security for us, were chugging across the floor, right across the entire ballroom. I thought, yeah, oh boy, I hope these guys don't kill him. Anyway, they just, got approached the guy, grabbed him to bring him outside. He sat on the floor in protest. So of course they just picked him up by hands and legs, carried him, threw him on the street. In the meantime, we took the banner that said "Oily money kills" or something like that, and we made the best of it. We had a great night
Yeah.
because everyone was cheering and clapping. And then the rest of the night, we were saying after every toast, we would say, "And just stop oil." And then there's a
I
great
love it.
picture.
And
And
I love the fact I saw that the video of Andre dragging them out went
yeah,
viral. I love I saw
yeah,
the picture of you holding up the Just Stop Oil
it, it,
flag.
it
So
was
well done. You
great.
captured the flag.
It was so much fun. We captured the colors and we hung them proudly. And I mean, it was so much fun, and it went viral. The people that took the video sent it to their friends, sent it to the papers. It was I think on the Independent website before the dinner was even over.
Oh,
And
I
then of
think they had some
course,
journalists there, didn't they? I
yeah,
think that on
yeah,
that sort of basis.
we had some journalists there, of course, and then we had, Turning Point posted it yesterday, which was nice of them to do. And it was just it made it's almost like we hired them for entertainment.
It
You know,
couldn't have been better, and it was a glorious time in
oh,
Windsor. An
absolutely.
unprecedented use of the word unprecedented, but the
Yeah.
biggest display ever. Donald Trump, President Trump, he loved it, didn't he?
Of course, yeah. I mean, I think he was a little. I understand from Bev Turner and others that Air Force One was a little bit more subdued than you'd expect, given the state visit. But I think with the Charlie Kirk, dying only last week, it took a little bit of the buzz out, at least for the inner bubble, the cabinet and the president and the vice president. But for the rest of us on the ground, in spite of that, there was just a buzz there, Andrew. I mean, I might as well have been in, Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah. I
When
know.
Windsor
I
felt
love
like
it. The feeling
Mar-a-Lago.
on the feeling on the streets, the wonderful, and nobody does the pomp and ceremony better
Right.
than the British. And he lapped it up, absolutely
Yeah.
lapped it up, which is glorious. The other thing which happened
Yeah.
today, obviously, the pomp and ceremony, but also the politics. He was there at Chequers. All
Yeah.
sorts of glorious figures, tremendous figures announced. 150 billion tech prosperity deal. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so this was great. I mean, we didn't expect this. They kept it, pretty much under wraps until yesterday. But there's been a major commitment by the US for tech investment in the UK. Now, that's great news for the UK. I mean, I'm just thrilled, for this country. And it really just sent a message that with technology, with nuclear power, with defense and security, we are in a partnership. We, the US, are in a partnership with the UK. The special relationship is real. We are confirming that we are partners in the basically against the our common adversaries. We're leading this kind of next century of defense and security against our threats. And I think that was just a really great moment. It was kind of a Reagan and Thatcher moment. Let's win the Cold War. And they're doing it, and they're not just talking about it. They're doing it with investment. They're doing it with joint ventures between the two countries, between the two private economies, as well as between the governments and the military. So it's really reassuring. And by the way, when I heard the Microsoft was investing 5 billion, I didn't think that was that much. By the end of the day, collectively, it was 31 billion. I'm sure
Yeah,
it's a bigger
absolutely.
number.
Well, the
The
31 billion
nuclear,
call and having the tech titans there at the dinner.
yeah,
So 31 billion core, 150 billion total, including Blackstone's 90 billion. They're talking about
yeah,
15,000 jobs
yeah.
and that sort of stuff. So Nick Clegg, however, put a bit of a dampener on this, in spite of
Of
the
course he did.
claims about an unbreakable bond. What was your sort of response to Nick Clegg?
Well, yeah, I didn't see his exact line, Andrew, and I'm sorry about that. But I do think that there are going to be haters out there. I'm not suggesting he's a hater, but we've seen a lot of pushback. How could you possibly think something is bad? They tried to turn it into, oh, the US is taking over the
Yeah,
UK. Nothing could be further from the truth. And I do think it's a great partnership. And I did and also, the president, as you know, is very fond of the UK. I mean,
yeah, he loves
this
it.
is not just this is not just transactional. This is not just looking for a business opportunity. And he wants what's best for the UK. And he knows that they are the best partner, the best ally we could have. And one more thing on the investment. When I first heard about the Microsoft 5 billion, I'm thinking, why would anyone build a data center in the United Kingdom where the energy prices are 5 times higher than in the US? I mean, electricity is the biggest cost of data centers. And and so, by midday, I heard about the nuclear agreement. So they solved it already. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what we need in this
Oh no,
country. We
absolutely.
need
These data
cheap,
centers are so
cheap and efficient.
absolutely, these
Yeah,
data
and
centers are
and
energy
and then
hungry.
cheap in energy, cheap energy to fund them, so to
Yeah,
to to power them. So yeah,
yeah.
good news all around.
It's got to be. Well, Nick Clegg, just to fill you in, he called it sloppy seconds from Silicon Valley.
Yeah, that's so funny. I mean, I guess he would know because he was at Facebook for, 7 or 8 years. And, I saw him on a podcast recently, and he actually came out, looking like a pretty decent guy. So I don't want to pick on him, but I do think, I mean, that's just atrocious to say. The US is a $30 trillion economy. What's he doing there? Is he picking on the US or is he picking on the UK? I don't know. But,
Well,
the UK is a much smaller economy, let's face it. But it's
yeah.
still the eighth biggest economy in the world. And
Oh,
it's still our absolute best military, security, defense, and intelligence partner. So I think the UK punches way above its weight.
we
Not
absolutely
to,
do. And as you know, I speak around the world about AI. I want to put the AI into Britain, back to
yeah,
the futurist.
make Britain great again.
Absolutely. So Trump said we got the X-Energy Centrica nuclear deal. That's 12 reactors,
Yeah.
1.5 million homes. That's finally done. And as you say, it powers the environment in mind as well, because that was always going to be the conflict. They talk about this special relationship, but King Charles is always on about the environment. How do you marry that with drill, baby, drill from Trump's narrative?
Yeah, I think they managed to avoid that topic delicately, but I do think, why would you do that in a state visit? You have to be diplomatic. I think the king has done a good job of being the king. When he was Prince Charles, I think it would have been rather awkward. And believe me, I had quite a conversation about drill baby drill on Tuesday night, thanks to the loonies that invaded infiltrated our dinner. But I do think, the idea is, okay, the king has parked his personal views about net zero and climate and all that, and I think has embraced the idea of nuclear power because it really should satisfy everyone except for the loonies because they still complain about that too. We don't want. I saw yesterday a T-shirt. We don't want your nukes. I mean, come on. It's cheap and efficient and clean energy, and it's desperately needed in the UK because the UK has basically been hostile to their own energy sector. This great country, Great Britain, was energy independent in 2005. That's only 20 years ago. So here you have the North Sea oil fields, you have the natural gas underground. So perhaps that would have been something uncomfortable for the king to discuss, but nuclear should check both boxes.
Oh, absolutely. Tariffs is obviously the word, and
Yeah,
Trump loves tariffs. He's got trillions from tariffs. We love the alliteration.
yeah, yeah.
10%, 10%
A little
baseline with a steel exemption.
hyperbole. Yeah.
We were hoping to negotiate, however, a better deal. What happened there?
Yeah. Well, there's still time. I don't think the state visit is over officially until tomorrow. But look, I think the UK, thanks to Brexit, has the best deal in the world right now of all our trading partners. So I think that's a fantastic, testament to the relationship. If there's some things to tweak there, I don't think there would have been anything groundbreaking. I think the tech investment is much more groundbreaking, the nuclear investment. So, you sort of take the wins and then maybe the trade negotiators are at something right now, and I think that this is the trade deal is good news. We can always complain about things on the margin, both the U.S. and the U.K. It's never perfect, but I think that the president has embraced tariffs not because on their own they're a good thing, they're a tax, okay, but he would rather have a tax on other countries or producers or corporates than a tax on people. And it's funny, the Democrats have been complaining about Trump and the tariffs only because it's Trump. They love tariffs. They've always loved tariffs, and they're a tax. And there's never a tax that the Democrats and Labor hasn't loved. So it's really kind of hypocritical to complain about tariffs. I think they're designed not just for the sake of revenue. They're actually fixing some problems that have developed over the last 30 years, especially since China came in to the WTO. So they're just there as a tool to correct some imbalances that are actually quite dramatic imbalances. And then you also have to look at tariffs again to fix these imbalances and at the same time look at them in the context of the overall economic policy, which the UK should take a page out of our playbook on, which is massive deregulation, and massive tax reduction. And if you do those two things alongside the tariffs, there will be economic growth in both countries. I'm not sure that the Labor government can embrace that because they like to regulate, they like to tax, but it's a good lesson. So when things change, hopefully in 2029 or sooner, we'll have a playbook to replicate, and the playbook works.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. One of the other things that critics say of Trump is that there's a risk that he goes back on deals. What's your response to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the president's not afraid to pivot, and he pivots many times. It's in a good and positive way. He's pivoted on armed conflict. He's pivoted on Ukraine even, and so that's if circumstances change, he will change. And so we're not going to stick to a commitment. First of all, these are a lot of these things that he's pivoted on or that he's backed away from are not formally executed and signed by the Senate. He can't do that. Only the Congress can do that. But more importantly, when things change on the ground, if American cities are being hollowed out because factories are closing, because we're buying cheap stuff from China. Well, I don't think that's so bad when he might, back away from a trade deal with China or something in the WTO. He's got to look after his people first, just like the king and the prime minister do for the people here in the UK. So and we're more often than not on the same page, the two countries. That's the other reason I think he's very happy to support the UK in a way he's not supported any other country, not even close.
Yeah, and I think that's really, really important. The other thing critics say, and what I love about doing the Andrew Eborn Show, is it's an opportunity to basically respond to the criticism that people put
Yeah.
on online. They say this claim of 15,000 jobs, it's great while you build these data centers, but once the data centers have been built, obviously the jobs disappear. What's your answer to that?
Well, I think two things. One is there's short term and there's long term. The nuclear energy and the data centers, those might not require a lot of jobs after the construction's finished. So a near term boom in construction jobs and employment, but then afterwards, those both of those things, both nuclear energy and AI, will make things more efficient, will make things less expensive, which means businesses will be more efficient. And so other businesses down the vertical. And that's really what's important here is, I mean, it's easy. I mean, AI is still new. You know a lot more about it than me, but energy's simple. By reducing energy prices, it allows companies to reduce their costs, hire more people, grow faster. I mean, it's economics 101, and the critics are economically illiterate. So it's just funny to hear that stuff. I could see it coming when they complain. I mean, how do you possibly find something wrong with a $30 billion investment in the company in the country? Of course they will. But
Yeah,
no, those will create jobs, not necessarily in nuclear energy or in artificial intelligence. They'll create jobs downstream.
yeah, and what's interesting, some fantastic people. I pointed out on several channels. You and I were talking to all sorts of stations around the world about the people who were invited. It's very a massive tech influence. With you had obviously Sam Altman was there. You had people from Nvidia.
Yeah.
You had all sorts of people basically to emphasize this is what we're looking at. Tech is the future. Some people who weren't there obviously was Elon Musk. What's the current relationship
Yeah.
there?
I think it's pretty fluid. Is that polite? They had their ups and downs, and mostly ups, but a couple of downs. And they kiss and make up after. I think, look, we've, I've had these discussions since the '80s. And if you're in agreement on 80%, then that you're in a good place, right? We are not going to agree on everything. It's interesting that there's pushback on occasion in the cabinet from one person or another. Some are more hawkish, some are more, America first. That's healthy. That's called debate. Elon Musk brought up some good points. He was right that there wasn't enough spending cuts. But I would argue we got the most spending cuts we could get. You sort of have to take the wins once in a while. There were more spending cuts in that bill than any other bill in history.
Yeah, and Trump
Now,
doubled
granted,
down
we have
on the
$36 trillion of debt,
yeah,
so we got to cut a lot more. But you
phenomenal
got to
figures. Yeah,
you got to
I mean,
walk
Trump,
before
Trump
you run.
doubled down. He doubled down on the big, beautiful bill, didn't he? He was very proud of
Yeah.
that and saying we're
Mm.
achieving more in just a nanosecond than we can achieve over several years. That was the big falling out with Elon, wasn't it?
Yeah, but there's some inside baseball here. Remember, Elon was disappointed there weren't enough spending cuts, but he was also disappointed that there were spending cuts in the electric vehicle mandates. Shocker. Teslas were subsidized by the American taxpayer for rich people to buy virtue signaling cars. Now, I want them to buy the cars they want. I really do. They can virtue signal all they want. In fact, Republicans started buying Teslas in the summer because of the mistreatment of Elon Musk by the left. So all of a sudden it became trendy for Republicans. But we buy. I don't care what party you're in. Buy the car you want to buy, whether it's internal combustion or electric. I think electric cars are silly, but that's just me. But it doesn't matter. I like. By the way, they're a
Why
great
do you think
car.
they're silly?
Well, because you have to charge them, and then they run out of power after 250 miles, and there are no chargers because even though Biden spent a trillion, a few hundred billion for electric chargers, there's I think eight of them have been built. So it's just not we're not ready. And
Yeah.
and by the way, they also require, you know, critical minerals that are mined in the DRC by 9-year-olds. They require a lot of rare earth elements that we buy from China, and we're completely dependent. 90% of the inputs in a Tesla are from China. So there's a long list of reasons, none of which are involved, net zero or anything. That's not the point. They're just, but again, and also I like the free market, and those cars, they're very nice cars. I love riding them, when I have a driver or something. But the American taxpayer, the blue collar guy that drives a crappy old Chevy, he's paying for that $7,500 per car, and only rich people can afford them because they're $70,000. If charge $77,000 instead of taking 7,000 from the American taxpayer, and so there's I think there was some conflict of interest there with Elon, and that was pretty obvious.
Yeah, and it is interesting, those sort of conflicts of interest. I mean, the other thing, the way of the future, as you say, about power, it's about this dynamic charging where you get charged as you go along, which would make sense and
Yeah,
more comfort for
that would be
people.
cool.
Have a look
That
at
would be
that.
really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing, one of the absence apart from Elon was obviously Prince Andrew, and there were
Yeah.
reasons for that. Dodged a bullet in terms of questions and the whole Epstein thing. What's your take on
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, look, I think it's the discussion around Epstein with both Peter Mandelson and President Trump are apples and oranges. Okay, I mean, uh, they're all we're all guilty of hanging around with the wrong people once in a while. I get it. There's no, I guess there shouldn't be any shame or guilt in that for making a mistake in life. But Peter Mandelson seems his mistake seemed a lot more serious than the president's. The president socialized with Epstein. Prince Andrew did a little more than socializing, I'm guessing, from what we know, and so it was wise of Prince Andrew to lay low. Again, talking about Peter Mandelson's experience with Epstein is completely different than the president's. And here's the real important point here: if there was anything uncomfortable in the so-called Epstein files or any old emails or anything like that, if there was anything, the Democrats would have leaked it or released it in October of 2024. I mean, they tried everything to stop Trump, extra legal ways to stop Trump. They tried to keep him off the ballot in a couple of states. They indicted him, elevated misdemeanors to felony charges. I mean, they pulled out everything. They cheated. They colluded with the government, colluded with the social media. The Biden campaign and the government colluded with the social media companies to keep the Hunter Biden laptop information out of the campaign. They're absolutely shameless. So you don't think they would have released or leaked some Epstein information that they had in their control? Absolutely impossible. So
Yeah.
it's a non-issue. It just won't go away. And I understand
I,
that it's a delicate topic.
it's a very delicate topic and beautifully skirted round, if you like. And it was a
Yeah.
cotton wool visit from that point of view, so avoided the
Yeah.
crowds and the protests.
Yeah.
One of
Yeah.
the things that people say, and it's good to hear your response to this, is that in that famous album, if you like, for Epstein's 50th birthday,
Yeah.
the only person who said that the message was faked was President Trump. He said it wasn't
Right.
his signature. And thinking of it logically, at that stage, he wasn't even a candidate politically. So, what do you say to the critics who say, why would he be the only person for whom it would have been faked?
Yeah, I don't know. The answer is I don't know, but I tend to believe the president, and here's why. For all the exaggerations about, the fact that he lies and I find very little credible evidence of that. Yes, on hyperbole, yes, on exaggerating, but that's it. And so, the Russia collusion hoax, total and utter lie and fabrication from the Clinton campaign, from the CIA, from the FBI, from some judges that should have known better. The Charlottesville hoax. There's just a long list of these hoaxes that are complete fabrications, and Trump ends up being right. He's proven right, and so. I would just based on history, I would say, look, if again the Dems will do anything they can to stop him, and I wouldn't put it past anybody. I wouldn't put it past them for fabricating something like that. Again, I don't have any evidence of that, but I'm just basing it on the context of all of the other things that they've accused him of, which were blatantly false. And this is something that's not going away. The Russia collusion hoax, we're not just, we've known that it was a hoax and that it was completely created and paid for by the Clinton campaign. But now we're learning only recently that the Obama White House was involved, that the FBI was involved, the CIA. I mean, this is really scary stuff. And so, I hope, this birthday card thing is, to me, it's trivial. There might have been if he actually did it, it would have been much easier to just say, "Oh yeah, I was just joking around," and it was 23 years ago or 25 years ago, whatever it was. So, given that, if I'm doing my decision tree, I would say that would have been an easier way than
Yeah.
than saying that he didn't do it. So, and there's some little anecdotal evidence, like the fact that he's never so-called doodled in his life, making little drawings. That's not something he's ever done. The signature does look different. I don't know if I want to hire a handwriting expert to determine that, but it just doesn't sound like him.
Well,
And so,
I'll tell you what I love, Greg, is that when he received the wonderful gold embossed invitation from Starmer from King Charles, he did himself turn around and say, "I wonder if that signature's fake." He said, "Is
oh,
that the
that's
real
really
signature
funny.
from
I didn't
King
catch that.
Charles?"
That's great.
Which is interesting. But it does matter to people because it's obviously the subject, and obviously careful how we say this, but it's a subject of a 10 billion lawsuit with Rupert Murdoch. Rupert was there as well. What's his current views
Yeah.
of Rupert?
Yeah, that's awkward, I know Rupert was in town because he was running around, the news building on Tuesday when I was there. And so,
Yeah.
I think, that's the president is, and this has been the case forever, but especially since he came onto the political scene in 2015, he's different than other presidents. He's not afraid to punch back. And it used to be for those of us that are polite, polite Republicans, it's kind of our nature. We don't burn things down when we lose an election. When one of our people is tragically killed, we don't start rioting. We don't start looting Nike stores and calling our mother and asking for her shoe size. So, this is something that's different about President Trump. He's not he wouldn't do any of that, the above stuff, but he'll punch back, and he does it right away. He does it very publicly. He does it in a very transparent way. And if he thinks someone's saying, fabricating stuff about him, especially after what he learned the hard way with Russia collusion, I mean, in many ways, he took the high road back then. He just said, "No, I didn't do it." Well, they didn't believe him, and they kept at it. And the media, absolutely failed the country by not investigating this stuff. So they just believed the Hillary Clinton campaign, and they were all in bed with the Hillary Clinton campaign. So that it was in their interest to die with the lie, to run with it. And so I think he learned the hard way in the first term. You can't really be polite about it. You've got to punch back, because if you don't, they will ruin you. And they almost did. They tried their best. They tried to bankrupt him. They tried to keep him off the ballot. And I wouldn't exaggerate and say that they tried to kill him, because those were there's no connection between the organized Democrats and the left, but by and the shooters in the case of both Charlie and the president last June. But it's hard to argue against the theory that this online hatred and calling him a fascist and a Nazi and Hitler, which is so unfair to the people who actually suffered under those conditions of fascism and communism, and dictators and all those names they call them. That radicalizes people. It really does. And it's not that much different than radical Islam, in the sense that the radical progressive left has turned some children that already are vulnerable because they have mental health issues, and so they're vulnerable to this online hate, and it's despicable. So look, I'm glad he's punching back. He took too much in the first term, and he came back swinging in the Biden years, and it worked, and he was right, as it turns out.
Yeah, it will be interesting, and probably will settle the case, as most of these cases tend to.
Yeah, of course.
Finally, you mentioned the horrendous murder of Charlie Kirk.
Yeah,
We're all on that. He was somebody who advocated jaw, jaw, not war, war. At the
yeah,
same time, free speech is front and center of the American Constitution, front and center of what's happened.
yeah.
Jimmy Kimmel his
Yeah.
show. He made a joke about that, some various observations. Trump rejoiced in his cancellation. What's your take on that?
Well, I mean, good for the network that canceled him. I mean, was it ABC? I can't remember.
It's
You
Disney
know,
owned, yes, it
and
was
yeah,
EBC.
yeah, and here's why. By the way, I don't think he should be arrested. I don't think he should go to jail like they would do in this country. If he was a man of the right and he said something like that, he would be arrested and put in jail in the United Kingdom. But temporarily, I hope. But in America, I would argue he's free to say that, even though it's vile and even though it's horrible, he's free to say that. But it's also quite responsible for the employer to do what they want. It's a capitalist system. Employer, that comment was bad for ratings, and that comment was bad for business. And even if it wasn't, if an employer decides that someone is so vile, I don't want them as the guy on Fox said overnight. That I don't want that guy's teaching my kids in school. I don't want him sitting in my break room at the office. I don't want him on the sidelines of my football team. It's just vile. So but the private sector should do that, and not the public sector. The government shouldn't police free speech. But if you want to fire someone because they're vile people, that's fine. Fire them.
So freedom of speech, but not freedom from consequences.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's a especially in the media and entertainment. You should be able to do hire and fire who you want. Andrew, I'm taking up this room.
It's
It's always a
fantastic. I can
pleasure to
see all
talk
sorts
to
of
you.
things happening in the background.
Yeah,
Greg, it's
yeah.
an absolute pleasure. I'll come and join you for more celebrations. But for now, Greg Swenson, thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Andrew. Appreciate it. Bye. I'm Greg Swenson, chairman of Republicans Overseas. I'm on the Andrew Eborn Show. Please subscribe.